What's up, everybody? Welcome back into the Lettermen Lounge. Come take a seat, gather with us, join us in talking about Ohio State football recruiting. That is Matt Parker, the Ohio State recruiting expert for LettermenRow.com. I am Jess Spencer Holbrook, the host of this here program, the Lettermen Lounge. Matt, let's get into it. We're not going to waste any time here. No pleasantries. I think we already did that enough off the show, off the air. So you were down in San Antonio last week to watch the Croots. Actually, the ink was already dry for these guys, and
Yeah.
the now that the dust has settled, the ink is dry. Ohio State signed a bunch of players in its class. We don't need to rehash all of that, but there were a lot of them down in San Antonio for the All American Bowl on three. Sent you down to do some boots on the ground, maybe shoes. I don't think you wore boots. If you did,
No.
correct me. Okay, so shoes on the ground coverage. Uh, in the Lone Star State, in the Alamo City. I don't, do they call it that? Whatever. Let's talk Ohio State recruiting, Matt. Just big takeaway, broad takeaway from Ohio State and its representation down in San Antonio last week.
Well, I'll start it off with the broad takeaway, and this might be oh yeah, they sent you down there, and that was your big takeaway, you big genius. But Ohio State's got some guys coming their way, Spence. By that specifically, I think for me, it's so important to start off with the two guys who, in my opinion, behind Dante Moore, were the two best offensive players at the entire thing, and that's wide receivers Brandon Inniss and Carnell Tate. Um, there was so many moments in the practices and then on the game last Saturday on the 7th where I just watched those two and my jaw drops. And my jaw drops after seeing them play, but then also spending 12 weeks with you watching guys like Marvin Harrison Jr. play and Emeka Ibuka play and Julian Fleming. And it's just that continuation of that talent there's more of it heading to Columbus. So I tip my cap to Brian Hartline. He did a phenomenal job recruiting not just those two, but also Noah Rogers and Bryson Rogers, no relation there. Recruiting both of them to have four in that wide receiver class, and Keenan Bailey. Give some shout out to Keenan Bailey working the South Florida area. But with Brandon and Carnell, they pose such a everyone likes comparisons, right? So Brandon would be the Jackson Smith and Jigba of that's what they envision him when they were recruiting him. They said, this is the kind of player that we see you being. And then with Carnell Tate, with his size right now, because he's about 6'2", a buck 85, buck 90, somewhere in there. Physically, he looks like he could play the role of Emeka Ibuka. You can line him up as an X, you can line him up in the slot. He's versatile talent. And that versatility was on display in San Antonio. There were a couple of times watching Carnell specifically, one of the best route runners, if not the best route runner in the country. I was just amazed. His cuts, his breaks, his hesitations, his head fakes. And he has all of that, and he's going to be developed by Brian Hartline, who is the best wide receiver coach in the country. Not arguably, he is. I don't know who is better than him. And so you have that kind of talent coming to Ohio State. And then Brandon Inniss, I mean, how many clips did you see from me and from other people in San Antonio of, oh, here's Brandon Inniss making this poor defensive back look like, a high school player, and they are high school players, but made him look like a freshman player. Those two stole the show for me for all 7 of the Ohio State signees that were there. But right after those two, and if our text exchange were made public about how much I think Calvin Simpson Hunt is going to be a difference maker, people would, be like, all right, man, settle down. But I can't put enough of an emphasis on this. Is a guy who probably next to Jermaine Matthews is the most college ready defensive prospect Ohio State signed in their 23 class. Charles Power and Cody Belair, the two guys who do the scouting and rankings evaluations for On3, In San Antonio, multiple times we had conversations about Ohio State's class, and they told me that in their opinion, the Calvin Simpson Hunt, Jermaine Matthews duo is the best cornerback duo by far, just with how they've, played and stuff like that and developed. And we've talked about Jermaine at length on this program, but we haven't really talked much about Calvin, and that's because he's in Texas. We're not in Texas. We can
You
watch
were in
huddle.
Texas.
I'm getting there. But I was in Texas. You're right. And he's 6 foot on a good day. He's 6 feet, probably more closer to that 5'11. But man, he is built. When he gets to Columbus, I will be intrigued to see what his weight training program looks like in terms of weight and stuff. And I wouldn't be surprised. And he moves so well for his size. I would have to guess he's about 190 pounds, 195 pounds. That might be his ceiling already. He might have already hit that number. And he can do it all. He's really good in a press man situation, which in this defense that Ohio State currently runs, that's exactly what they want and need. They need a guy that is not afraid to get in the grill of a wide receiver, which I saw Calvin Simpson Hunt do that on multiple occasions. People would, I tweeted out a video of him putting the clamps on, if you will, as the kids say, I believe, on a couple of different wide receiver prospects there. And it's amazing. First of all, just the talent that these kids have is amazing. And I think, people want to say, oh, this class isn't good. Like, let's calm down really, really quick. Just really quick. Ohio State has guys coming their way. And that was on display firsthand. Another guy that really, to close the thought on Calvin Simpson Hunt, this is a guy who I think gives Ohio State, a lot of options. He can play that true corner position, has honestly an opportunity to really crack the rotation with, the cornerback situation. We know the cornerback situation very well at Ohio State, but, especially you covering the team and stuff like that. And these true freshmen might have to be called on, in this 2023 season that is only a few months away, but it'll be here before we know it. And if you have a guy like Calvin Simpson Hunt who can get in the face of wide receivers, isn't afraid to do that, but then also shed the blocks and try and make plays, in the run game, it's exactly what you want. It's just a fearlessness and being on an island all at the same time. It's just that mentality. Ohio State prides itself on the BIA mentality and things like that. And that's what this reminds me of, is that, that 2014 secondary, that, 2019 secondary, all of those, really talented, it seemed like every single year Ohio State had a draft pick from its defensive backs. That's what his play reminds me of, is that attitude that he brought to the field. And I think that's something that Ohio State sorely needs.
So back in Columbus, when I was here, after I got back from Atlanta, I started paying attention to some of the things that were coming out, and two guys kind of stuck out to me. And we can kind of start to move on from that, maybe transition from 23 to 24 after this. But I wanted to get your thoughts, because I was impressed by Malik Hartford's ability to go down there and compete at a high level. And I thought from all the reports down there that he was impressive despite being lower ranked than all these other guys you're mentioning. And then Lincoln Keenholz, still trying to figure out the pronunciation of that. I'm sorry, folks. I'm going to go with Keenholz for now. Lincoln Keenholz, who I think is a little slept on because he was a late bloomer, late to the class, not from a place where you have a lot of talent to play against. But the throw that he made to score a touchdown in the All-American Bowl, and then just the play throughout the week of Malik Hartford, I thought those were just as promising, if not more promising, signs for Ohio State, that they really did well in this class, because Carnell Tate and Brandon Inniss are going to be good. Brian Hartline took them. They're 5 stars for a reason. Like, if Brian Hartline takes you, you're good.
Right.
Let's just say that. That Calvin Simpson Hunt has been climbing those rankings for a long time now. On3's been very high on him ever since he was even committed to Texas Tech, and the Buckeyes flipped him. But for Malik Hartford, who's been lower ranked for most of his recruitment, and for Lincoln Keenholz to show up there, and both of them to make an impact and catch your eye and catch guys' eyes that were down there, following this thing for on three. I thought those were an indication that Ohio State did a really good job of solidifying this class. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start off with Malik, because he and I had some pretty good conversations down there about his game and how, he's really just worried about himself. He's just worried about, how can I get better? What can I do here? Like, here being San Antonio, what can I do here to get better for Ohio State? Because Malik's already on campus. He's an early enrollee, already doing the workouts, and things like that. And the thing about his game that impressed me the most is, he's a very rangy and lanky safety. He's about 6'2", 6'3", a buck 70, buck 75. But his ability to, he uses his length to his advantage, and that's why he was so impressive to me. He can stride for stride some of those bigger wide receivers that were there. He can stride for stride with those tight ends if he's over top of them. His play reminded me a lot of, now mind you, very raw comparison here, but his play reminded me a lot of, Lathan Ransom and what Ohio State asked him to do this year. Stand over top of those tight ends, cover those tight ends, try and, go from point A to point B, make plays, kind of get in the box if you need to, something like that. And just Malik's ability to go from covering a guy like Brandon Inniss to covering, the multiple high 4-star tight ends that were at the All-American Bowl, and not flinch, make plays. There's a play where he's the lone high safety, and he picks up a crossing route that turned into a post, and at the right second just jumps that route in the end zone, and it almost comes away with the interception. And I'm like, you need guys like that at Ohio State. That's the kind of talent that Ohio State needs to bring in. And that's why when they see a guy who, I feel like college coaches, and I feel like we've gotten some confirmation about this, they do pay attention to the rankings because it's just, curiosity. They do pay attention to that. But at the end of the day, if Ohio State thinks a kid can play and is good enough to be a part of, the Ohio State program, they're going to offer the kid and they're going to take the kid. And that's exactly the case with Malik Hartford. It also helps that he's from Cincinnati, so they're going to be honestly a little tougher on him because he is an Ohio kid, and they're going to want to see if he can play. And Malik showed that in San Antonio. He definitely showed that, he is more than deserving of being at Ohio State, and that he can make plays, and I expect him to get a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger, a little bit faster. He's going to need to do those things. Going to have to eat a couple of cheeseburgers. He can take our cheeseburgers, quite honestly.
Before you go any further, Matt, I saw Malik. I want to make this a point. I saw Malik at his signing event for the foundation. I went and saw it was Malik Hartford, a couple of receivers. Jelani Thurman was there, Jermaine Matthews, and Malik Hartford was there. And so I told Malik that I was with Lettermen Row and on three. And then his first words were, "I better see a ratings bump after last week," because he knows that he's underrated. And I think I agree with that. The more I watch him, the more I see that the way that he operates, the more I kind of learn who he is and how, what motivates him to become better and things like that. The guys he's going to be around in that safety room. I'm starting to agree with that. I think he is a little underrated. I don't make the rankings, but if you're listening, people who do, take Malik Hartford at his word, bump him up a little bit. I think he deserved it after his performance on down in San Antonio.
And yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not going to say that he was, the best defensive back there, but he was one of them. He was certainly one of them. And it should give Ohio State fans a lot of a good feeling that, a talent like that is headed their way, is headed Ohio State's way, is actually already there.
Yeah.
Don't need to say that he's heading his way. He's already there. But another guy who I think, and you and I both think this, I'm pretty sure, who is, maybe underrated or not undervalued by any means, but that is Lincoln Keenholz. Lincoln was the first to say, during the practices that it was going to take him a second to get comfortable playing against that talent level, playing against that high level of competition. That's something that he has never been around, never competed against, never seen before. And that's not a knock by any means on the talent that he has played against. It's just stating the truth. He was playing against kids that are from Georgia, Alabama, Ohio, Texas, California, all the states. Everyone knows. And the thing that impressed me the most is that he never flinched. He never backed down. It did not look like the moment was too big for him. And it did take him a second, the timing, working with that kind of speed and working against that speed, because that's always the biggest thing, making that big jump is the speed and the timing, especially for a quarterback. You go from throwing to, wide receivers in South Dakota to throwing to guys, that are going D1. That's a big jump. And then to do that on national television in front of, God and everyone else, that could be a very intimidating thing. And like a true quarterback, just stone faced. Abs did not let the moment get too big for him. And if anything, his confidence picked up throughout the week. You could see him smiling while he's, slinging it around and stuff like that. And he's cracking jokes and being more comfortable, it just opens up so many things. And watching the game, because I flew back home from San Antonio back to Columbus and was watching the game on TV. And the two touchdown drives that Team West, which is the team that Lincoln played on, in a 55-17 fat L. But those two touchdowns were engineered by Ohio State quarterback signee Lincoln Kienholz. And that's on a team that had Austin Novosad, who Ohio State heavily tried to flip. And then Aiden Childs, an Oregon State signee, who, like Lincoln, is was a fast riser his senior year of high school. But I wanted to circle back to this, that I mentioned Austin Novosad first, and that interests me because, when I started this position, it was, okay, let's find out if Austin Novosad is going to flip from then Baylor to Ohio State. Ohio State was high on him. He liked the Buckeyes, took an official visit while being committed to Baylor. The whole Austin Novosad saga was a big thing for Ohio State, and it looked like for a hot minute that the Buckeyes were gonna pull off the flip. And I wrote about this for Lettermen Row, that after watching both of them compete, I think Ohio State got the better end of the deal. Just the moment did not seem too big for a kid that is from a town of 14,000 people and played against lesser talent. There's no nice way for me to say that, and I feel really bad about it. But like, Austin Novosad plays in Texas, played high school football in Texas. That's a rich place. That's a talent-rich place. And he was great throughout the week, no doubt about it. Austin Novosad was probably the most consistent quarterback on that Team West throughout the week. But when the lights were on and the stage was the biggest, Lincoln Kienholz balled out, man. Balled out. And can't tell me he didn't.
And that's the thing about these Ohio State quarterbacks. You have to be good when the lights are on, because, did CJ Stroud play his best football throughout his career? Maybe not. But against Georgia, when the lights were the brightest, he was at his best. And that's the thing that Lincoln Kienholz, did he miss a couple throws here and there in practice down in San Antonio? Sure. He's a young quarterback. He's trying to get better. He's finally got the bright lights on him when he hadn't had that at TF Riggs in Pierre, South Dakota. As a South Dakota fan, somebody who went there, there's not a lot of people there. I've been to South Dakota once, so I can talk about it, because I'm an expert. And the lights aren't the brightest there. I think it gets really dark when it gets dark. Like, there's not a lot of lights there at all, man. It's not bright at all. But with the lights on in San Antonio for the All-American Bowl, he was very good. He made a couple throws that I was like, oh, so they got Ryan Day went and got this guy.
Yeah.
Corey Dennis went to see this guy. Okay,
Well,
I see it.
yeah, but really quick, before we transition, there's one play that I want to talk about from that All-American Bowl. And it was that Lincoln Keenholz made. And it was the first touchdown pass that he threw. Maybe 2 minutes left in the third quarter, somewhere in there. I mean, the team is losing like 100-3 or something like that. Okay, like it was bad. It was like Ohio State playing Toledo from this past year. And like, all right, let's change the channel. Why did the Big Ten make this an 8 o'clock game? But you know, he had all of the right intangible things, right? Head was still up, still encouraging guys, regardless of the score. Didn't matter. That stuff that matters. That stuff that does show on tape. That stuff that college coaches look for. And then you have that mentality paired with the actual play he made, which was mobile pocket going to the right, pocket breaks down and falls apart. So he has to spin out to his right, roll to his left, and manages to set his feet and on a dime places like a 40, I think it was a 43-yard pass for a touchdown.
That's what we're talking about.
I remember sitting there in the old recliner, and I'm just like, damn, that's a play. And then I remember, oh wait, yeah, of course it is, because Ryan Day and Corey Dennis recruited this kid. And so that needs developed. And once that gets developed, just think of what he could be. That potential is there. And I think Ohio State fans, again, especially based off of Lincoln's play against much better talent in an all-star setting, I think Ohio State fans should be really excited that that's who they got for 23.
Matt, I think this should just start to focus on the All-American Bowl in these 2023s. I know we were going to dive into the 2024s, but to be honest, I kind of want to talk about Luke Montgomery still. I know there was a play that went a little viral, and Luke was the first to admit to you that, you know, this kind of stuff's going to happen sometimes when you're playing against other 5-stars. Luke is a borderline 5-star in his own right. Of course, everyone knows what I'm talking about. The play that went viral where Keon Keeley, the Alabama signee, almost Ohio State commit at one point. Man who met LeBron, as we can categorize him.
Yeah.
We, at the Notre Dame game, but Keon Keeley kind of pancaked Luke Montgomery. We're not going to lie about it. Luke didn't really hide from it that much. But other than that, and Luke is going to struggle. We talked about this off the air. I'm not trying to steal what you told me, but Luke's going to struggle in one-on-ones from time to time. He hasn't really played the greatest competition at Finley. And also, he hasn't really gone in a lot of one-on-one situations. And so one-on-ones are not his specialty. But other than that play, let's exclude that because that was, Thayer Munford was a really good tackle, and Aiden Hutchinson put him on his butt in one play against Michigan in 2021. So those kind of things happen, Trent Williams has been put on his butt by a defensive end before. There's good defensive players too. Other than the play, let's talk about Luke Montgomery a little bit because I still think Ohio State got a really, really, really good tackle in this class in Luke Montgomery, who's now officially a Buckeye already.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, Luke, if this somehow comes across your radar, I was not going to bring it up. So if you got beef, take it up with Spencer. But anyway, yeah, looking at Luke started off, he was a swing offensive lineman in San Antonio. So he played both right tackle and right guard. And he had told me that he hadn't played on the right side of the offensive line in, I think, 2 years is what he told me. He had been the left tackle at Finley for all of his senior year and a large portion of his junior year. I know he played some center somewhere in his high school career, but he's playing on a completely new side of the offensive line. And, that's switching your feet, switching your hands. It's literally doing everything backwards or mirrored, however you want to say it. The thing about Luke that really stands out to me is how quickly he picks things up. And so watching him go back and forth by the end of the week, watching him go back and forth between tackle and guard seamlessly, which is something Ohio State loves to do with their offensive linemen, is just play chess and checkers. trying to find the right five and the right spots. That's something that Luke Montgomery offers for Ohio State. And that's a big reason why Ohio State liked Luke Montgomery. Other than his size, of course, his size, that's going to matter for offensive linemen. But to really, I guess, kind of just, knock on a whole diatribe about Luke Montgomery, because, Luke's a good player, obviously. He's going to Ohio State for a reason. But it's the options that he gives Ohio State. And now with Ohio State having to replace 3 of their starting 5 offensive linemen from last year, there's a real chance that if Luke has a great spring and an even better training camp in August, it would not surprise me if he was the 6th man on the 2 deep, 6th or 7th man. I would not be shocked by that. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really tough when you've got a guy like Josh Fryer. You've got a guy like Enoch Bimahi, who may not end up starting, but if they get a guy in the portal, but will play a role on this team. You've got a guy like Zen Mahalski, who's kind of bought his time and made sure to put a lot of effort in, and he showed a lot of promise. I heard some good things from some staffers that I've talked to, around the program. There's a few guys that I think that will still probably rank higher than Luke as far as the pecking order on who gets on the field, but to see him at least in the 2 deep would not surprise me. And that's going to take a lot of work from Luke, but I think that, between 2 times I saw him, his junior year and his senior year, he went from, okay, this guy might be able to play center or guard at Ohio State to, oh my God, that's a tackle. And like that tells you his work ethic and the way that he wants to continue to progress. I'm not going to put it out of the question. As far as 6th man goes, I may push back a little on that, but on the 2 deep, which is the 10 deep, which, you think 10 guys is a lot, but also, injury luck is injury luck. You might resort to your 8th or 9th guy by the end of the year on the offensive line. That's just how, the chips fall sometimes. He might get called upon at some point. And if he doesn't, then he might get in at the end of the 3rd quarter, the middle of the 4th quarter when you're playing, Bowling Green or Rutgers or, one of these terrible teams, that Ohio State, is forced to play every year because of the Big Ten. So Indiana. So, it's just one of those things where Luke probably is going to see some time. Will that be as the 6th man or will it be as the 10th man? I think there's a lot of growth that needs to happen for him to take the step from 10 to 6 to get there.
And that's why I said, it would have to be a great spring and an even better August training camp. And also part of that 6th man spot for me, 6th or 7th man spot for me was, he was very open with myself in San Antonio and then, and some other Ohio State, media platforms about the fact that Ohio State is not shy about the fact that they really like him to play that bison position that Josh Fryer played this past season, and wearing the eligible number and essentially just down blocking and knocking someone's teeth out, which Luke Montgomery is very good at doing. Per source, very good at doing that. So that's why for me, maybe as a package, and a package is different than the actual rotation of things and like where the alignment would be for, a normal set. I do understand that. But to come in as a freshman and, get that kind of expectation, if you will, that says something. That says a lot what they think about him and what he brings to the table before they've had a chance to really get their hands on him.
So now that we're just staying with this 23 class, Matt, we have to talk about all of them. And we maybe saved the best for last because the guy who also kind of left an imprint on you, I know, on some people there down in San Antonio and on me as I'm watching from afar was Joshua Mickens, who went way under the radar as Ohio State was chasing Damon Wilson, who ended up signing with Georgia, Keon Keeley at Alabama, Mateo Uiagalelei at Oregon. They say Ohio State went 0 for 3 on signees as far as defensive end. And I'm not really sure if Joshua Mickens ends up as a true defensive end, but he was impressive with everything he did down in San Antonio. And I would like for you to, final minutes here, closing thoughts, just about Joshua Mickens and his performance.
Joshua Mickens is going to have to rely on 2 things to be successful at Ohio State: his speed and his length. He has very long arms for only being like 6'4", 6'5", very long arms. And he is so quick off the edge. He's not going to beat you with his physicality. But the moment that those the hands of an offensive tackle shoot, he can swipe them away and move past you. It's so impressive. He has definitely been forecast as, that Jack Leo role, whatever the heck they call it. I don't know. It changes every day, it seems. But whatever Jack Sawyer played this year, that's what they see Joshua Mickens playing. And for me, that is the perfect spot for him, given his size. And also with his size, because he's, again, like 6'4", 6'5", somewhere in there. If you need him to play in space, you run some funky coverage and some funky blitz like Jim Knowles likes to dial up. That gives him options. If you need someone in the flats to cover a running back on a swing or something like that, this guy can do it. He has the speed and the capabilities of doing it. Now, granted, that all depends on what, Mick Marotti and Ohio State want to do with him in the weight room, if they want to beef him up or if they want to keep him maybe a little leaner to do something like that. That is to be seen. However, Joshua Mickens, with his hands, his speed, and his length, very impressive. Very, very impressive.
So this might be a weird comparison because Javonte Jean-Baptiste didn't have the top 150 career maybe that some people thought he would, but I thought he was productive. I think he had 4.5 sacks, half of one against Georgia. He obviously was good enough to beat, I think, Broderick Jones off the edge at one point, who's probably going to be a first or second round pick from Georgia. Javonte Jean-Baptiste had a decent career at Ohio State. He came to Ohio State at 6'4", 6'5". I think he was more in the 6'4" range when he got there, 6'5" once he got there. Kind of developed a little more. He was only 215 pounds when he showed up. Josh Mickens listed at 225. I think he's probably more in that 220 range, maybe 230. But I think that is a little bit of a comparison. Those long arms, you're not sure, is he a linebacker? Is he a defensive end? He's listed as an edge. But Javonte Jean-Baptiste was listed as a linebacker when he came in, and he never played linebacker at all at Ohio State. He moved immediately down to defensive end. But you've kind of got a tweener here in Josh Mickens. I think there's some versatility Ohio State can kind of play with a little bit. I wanted to compare him to Mitchell Melton, who came in as an edge and is now more of a linebacker. I think the Javonte might be a little cross between Mitchell Melton and Javonte Jean-Baptiste. Kind of hard to say Mitchell Melton. I haven't seen him healthy yet in his Ohio State career. Ohio State's very excited about him, though. As somebody from the team side, I know that the Buckeyes were excited to have Mitchell Melton on the field. Had a huge spring before he took that ACL injury and couldn't play this year. I see Mickens as maybe a cross between Javonte Jean-Baptiste and Mitchell Melton, and I think that's only good news for Ohio State. What do you think?
No, absolutely. That's a great comparison, just kind of blending two very unique players, honestly, into one and having that be Joshua Mickens. And now with this defense that Ohio State plays, you're going to need to have those kind of tweener guys, right? Because Ohio State has Arvell Reese in the 2023 class, who you look at him and you're like, yep, that guy's a linebacker. He is long for a linebacker, but the way he plays, his speed, everything, that guy's a linebacker. You look at a guy like Joshua Mickens, he could put his hand in the dirt. He could play from 5 yards out. Let's put him at 3 and, have him in a hybrid stance and go from there. Good comparison there. And quite honestly, you expect to see more prospects like that signed with Ohio State based off of this defense, because I think we all saw this year a guy like Jack Sawyer, probably not the spot for him. And that's just the roster configuration and construction from what they had to what they needed to use, and trying to find give your best players the best opportunity to succeed. But moving forward, you're going to see a little bit more leaner edges, I would expect, for that specific position. And Joshua Mickens is just the first of many.
Matt, you have officially passed the 2023 class on to me and Andy Backstrom and Tim May as the guys who covered the team. Of course, we're going to have full coverage of that at lettermenrow.com as these guys get acclimated. The early enrollees, at least some of them, arrived on campus last week. Now, beginning their Ohio State careers, maybe some of them get their black stripe off here this spring and start to make push in the depth chart. For now, though, we're still talking about them as recruits because they're in that transition phase, Matt. They're going from young high school standouts to lowly freshmen on the depth chart who just need to make a name for themselves. Obviously, all jokes aside, these guys have already made names for themselves. They're going to Ohio State, for God's sakes. They know, people know who they are. Anyway, that's Matt Parker. I'm Spencer Holbrook. Thanks for hanging out in the Lettermen Lounge, kicking your feet up and talking Ohio State recruiting with us. This was a lot of fun. We're going to make this a more regular thing, Matt. We got to talk about recruiting because that's what the people desire, Matt. People want it. We're going to provide it. We provide it all year long at lettermenrow.com. Come join us, $30 for nearly an entire year. That's a hell of a deal. if I do say so myself. But again, for Matt on the other side of the screen, I'm just Spencer Holbrook. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We will see you guys next time.